What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Etchy, and joining me are three of the best and brightest players of the Pokemon TCG. First up, we have the man whose Twitter posting cannot be matched, Jake Gearhart. Jake, are you feeling ready for Louisville?
I'm not really feeling ready. I've been sort of taking it easy this season, so I'm just going in to play a deck that'll high roll a little bit, and if I get there, I get there. Otherwise, I'll cube with my new cube that I'm building, so that'll be more fun.
All right. Next up, we have the Block King, Benny Billinger. Benny, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm, ready for Louisville. I've been practicing a lot, trying out a lot of different decks. I'm kind of solid on a deck right now, and it would probably take a lot to convince me off of it. So I'm
Exciting.
pretty hyped.
Cool. Love to see it. Love to be confident in your deck choice before 8 p.m. the day before the tournament. So that's great. And then, of course, we're also joined by Gabe Smart, coming off a solid top 128 at Dortmund. How's it going, Gabe?
Going pretty okay. Made day two at the first two regionals of the season. Would have liked to do significantly better, but can't really complain. Excited for Louisville. Feel a little bit better about this tournament. Have a pretty good idea of what I want to play. Kind of like two options that I feel pretty okay with. But yeah, I know things are going well.
Cool. Lots to go over for today's podcast with both multiple regionals and a special event happening since our last episode. And of course, Louisville this weekend, the big event everyone's talking about. So many decks to cover, but I think the first place we should start is with Gabe talking about his Dortmund experience. Gabe, you ended up playing Charizard to Dortmund. How did it go? How was Zarding?
Yeah, I played a pretty basic Zard list. The only, I guess, kind of interesting thing was I had 4 Nest Balls. I think Charizard wants to go first in this format. I think your matchups versus, Dragapult and also Terapagos are pretty rough when you go second. So I think that you definitely want to go first. So I think that the heavy count of the Nest Balls is probably what you want to do. I mean, Zard is fine. I went 8-4. I lost my Winning to 32. I think I would have been one of the very few 9-3s to make it because I had like 70% resistance. So that was a little bit disappointing. I didn't play any Manaphy. I think that's one of the big things that we saw were a lot of different decks seem to be cutting Manaphy. So I guess that was, I guess one of the interesting things. Seeing Dragapult win without any Pidgeot was definitely a, major surprise because I feel like the Pidgeot was kind of like the standard variant of that deck. So, that was, definitely one of the surprising things. But yeah, I mean, getting top 128's not too bad. Got like 80 points. So yeah, I mean, I'm feeling okay, but yeah, hoping to do better in Louisville.
Speaking about Zard, then, how do you feel its position kind of going forward? With obviously a bunch of events happened and the meta shifted since then. Dragapult seems to be even more like clearly at the high end than it was before. Do you still feel like it's a great play, a solid play? Is it less good than it was before? What do you think about it?
I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, I think the Dragapult matchup is relatively close. The majority of Dragapult lists aren't playing the TM Devo, which usually swings the matchup pretty like heavily towards Dragapult. So I think from my testing, I was feeling about 50-50. You could actually play the Hero's Cape for that matchup, and the matchup becomes significantly better. But yeah, I mean, Zard is good. I think we didn't see a whole lot of Zard see success at Dortmund. And I think one of the main reasons was I think a lot of people were just, kind of preparing for it. I think that I think players got new toy syndrome where like they wanted to try out the new things or like maybe they wanted to focus on, what they thought was going to be the strongest deck, which was most likely Charizard and like heading into that event. So I think a lot of people, kind of prepared for it. But now, people are, kind of worrying about decks like Lugia, like Dragapult as well. People's, I guess, like attention is, kind of now, I think, like pulled away from it. So I think that heading to Louisville, I think it becomes significantly stronger. I definitely expected to see a lot more success because it was pretty surprising because there were a decent amount of Zard in day 2, but the highest placing list was 20th, and that was the only one in top 32. There were a bunch of them in top 64, but the deck just really wasn't able to, convert that well. But I think it's going to convert significantly better heading into Louisville.
Any other thoughts on Zard in general from Jake or Benny?
I think the fact that Dragapult won the tournament is like not a great sign for Zard, and also Terapagos doing pretty well. It's like those two like Dusknoir decks in general are like kind of an issue for Zard, just because you can get run off the board pretty easily. And Zard, like if you even if the opponent only gets like one Dusknoir off, that usually means like your lone Pidgey goes down, and then you're sort of in a bad spot for the rest of the game. So that makes me like concerned for anyone playing Charizard. I think Raging Bolt should start going down in numbers, but I don't know if it actually will, and that's like a good matchup for Zard that is kind of going away. And then also, I think Regidrago is like pretty solid, a lot more solid than the play rate reflects right now. And with Raging Bolt hopefully going down, I mean, people will still play it, but um, the good players probably won't play Raging Bolt. And so if you can sneak past day one with like Regidrago, then you'll have a much better spread, matchup spread, and that's like not good for Zard either. You don't want to hit Regidrago. So yeah, I think Zard is just kind of getting kicked out. The format's gotten too fast for it, I think.
Yeah,
The shot Zard's broken.
I do kind of agree with Jake there. Zard is just like, yeah, it's too slow now. All the decks are very fast paced. You know, you have Terapagos, you have Raging Bolt, Palkia, even like that's like way too fast for it. Like, there's just so many things that can just like wipe your entire board like on the second turn. And I mean, like Zard's obviously a deck that has been known to come back from this, but I don't really see it getting a lot of play in Louisville, at least. Like, maybe if the meta shifts after this event, it could see another rise. But at least going into this event, I don't really see it being that good of a play.
That's fair. All right, Gabe disagrees.
It's a good deck, dude. It's gonna do well. I just know it's just too fundamentally powerful of a deck. That's just my opinion, though. It does everything like pretty solidly. It doesn't have any major weaknesses, except for the Dusknoir, thing, which is pretty annoying for sure. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, just 20% in the meta.
Yeah. I think it just does everything that Terapagos does, but worse. Like, you attack at the same time. Like, Terapagos can't attack turn 1, Zard can't attack turn 1. But Terapagos attacks her 1 energy and is a basic.
You have 330 HP, bro.
Yeah, but everything's one-shotting everything.
You have to have a rare
and you have to vomit your board with Lumineon Rotom to set up and then Pidgeot in play. Like, I don't think the 330 is like good enough to outweigh it. 330 HP is great, but if you have like anything on your bench, then it's not so good. So like the only thing that Charizard can do that is like kind of unique is like make board states where you like literally just have Charizards and Pidgeots in play, and that's like pretty annoying for stuff like Terapagos and the Palkia decks to deal with. But I don't think that's like a good enough reason to play Charizard when you can just get run off the board. And I feel like Dragapult just does everything that Charizard does, but better. Like Dragapult can actually gatekeep opponents' Duskulls so that the 320 HP actually matters. And yeah, then Dragapult is also better at winning the game in fewer attacks. Like Charizard is not going to win in fewer than 3 attacks, unless like you pull off the crazy like Dusknoir Briar combo. But Dragapult can like regularly win in just 2 attacks with only 1 Dusknoir use. So yeah, I feel like Zard just doesn't have anything going for it, in my opinion. Like the Raging Bolt matchup is it, but I don't care about Raging Bolt.
Yeah, all right. Well, Zard players, sorry, but at least Gabe still believes in you. I think it's pretty interesting how Zard was just on top of the Japan format for so long, throughout the entirety of when they had the same cards as us, and it just seems to be falling off here in the rest of the world as everything else kind of develops with the meta. But before we get into our other decks, or I guess how we're gonna go into our other decks here, normally I just have a list of the decks that I wanted to cover in the episode after talking with everybody on the podcast before we actually start, just to make sure everyone has like things to say about certain things. Instead of just going through that list kind of like one at a time, I'm just going to ask some questions first, and that'll dictate where we go. I already know what the answer to this first one is going to be. But what do we think the most overrated deck is right now in Standard?
Raging Bolt.
Raging Bolt.
Awful deck.
That deck is a pile of garbage.
Please play it to Louisville, by the way. Everyone who wants to play, please. I would love to.
It's going to win now because you're all saying this. It's going to just win.
If you are bringing Raging Bolt to Louisville, you might as well get a refund.
You can't do that anymore.
Even if Raging Bolt wins the tournament. Oh yeah, you can't get a refund. Yeah.
Yeah,
There'll be one
that's-
in top 8. I almost guarantee
there,
you. Someone will make
there
top
will
8
at
with
least
the
be
deck.
one. Yes,
100%. 100%.
There will be Raging Bolts that do well, but that's only because too many people will play the deck. And like if 20% of the room plays Raging Bolt and it's got like at Dortmund we saw like it drop from number 1 played deck to like number 6 or 7 or something. Like
in day 2, right?
that's gonna happen. Yeah, in day 2.
Baltimore did worse. It fell off, I think, the entire graphic, right?
Yeah.
Like the top 5. Yeah, it completely collapsed.
And if like that still means that there's like 7-8% of Raging Bolts in day 2. But you had to have everyone playing that deck to get those numbers. And so yeah, if the deck is represented how it should be, it won't make top 8. It won't probably won't make top 32 if it's represented how it should be, but it'll be overrepresented and it'll do well, and then people will still play it and argue that it's good, but it's not.
The only thing it has going for it is its consistency, and it is pretty good at capitalizing on decks that stumble. I think it's probably the best deck at, kind of just like, if you don't set up great, they can just, kind of run you over. And I feel like they can like pretty consistently, kind of achieve that. So I think that's really the only thing that's going for it. And I think that's why the deck will probably see success is, someone's just going to play against a lot of lists that just, don't set up, very well. And, Bolt's, pretty good at, capitalizing. So I think that's like the mainly, biggest reason that like it's going to see some success. But I mean, like your Zard matchup is not great. Your Terapagos matchup is not great. Your Lugia matchup is, not great as well. It doesn't really necessarily beat any of the top decks consistently, but like what you lose in matchup spread, you kind of gain in consistency. So I think that's kind of one reason as to why, someone will see success with it, but that doesn't mean that like you should be playing it.
Yeah, I mean, we literally saw the runner-up list at the special event just cut Briar completely, but just for more consistency.
Yeah.
Just that was enough to just push them more and more deeper into the tournament. So
your best bet is just running people over.
Yeah,
that's literally your best bet. Is just like to make your list like set up perfectly. Like I think my list has like 2 or 3 ultra balls in it right now, just because I don't find myself, being able to consistently set up enough with the deck, which is kind of embarrassing because that's kind of what the deck should be doing. So I think that cutting all text, from the deck, everything is, pretty good. I've even seen some lists cut like Radiant Greninja as well. Just because benching it versus, like so many of the Dusknoir variants just feel so bad. So that's also something that's kind of interesting. I don't know if people are actually going to do that, but I have seen a couple lists, decide to cut it, but I don't know.
One of the things that Raging Bolt does have going for it is the fact that it's easy to play, and I think that's what really gets people on board with it. And like it targets like the lower skill level of players who know that they can't compete with the top players, but they still want to play a deck that they know they can probably pilot well to the regional. So that's also another reason why I think it will see play. But I feel like if you have enough time, you can easily pick up another deck that is just way better than Raging Bolt, honestly.
I think like Raging Bolt is like it's like the mistakes that you can make with the deck just usually don't matter. So it's not that the like you can't play the deck perfectly, but that doesn't matter 99% of the time. You're gonna play it well enough.
Yeah.
But I think if you put in like the Raging Bolt's game plan is so straightforward in every matchup that even if you just look like a little bit a step above to like the Dragapult deck that won Dortmund, it's slightly more complicated because what you're doing every game depends a little bit more on the matchup than just chasing 2 prizes every turn, which Raging Bolt does. Then I think like anyone can pick up that Dortmund winning Dragapult deck and do well with it. It doesn't take that much more effort. It's like just because it's a stage 2 deck doesn't mean it's any more complicated. Like your combo, instead of discarding energies and Sadas, is playing a rare candy and putting your Dragapult into play and then attaching a crystal to it. It's not that much harder to do. So then, just knowing how to use Dusknoir is the only like slightly challenging thing with the deck. But yeah, I think like Gabe mentioned earlier that he was surprised that like Dragapult without Pidgeot won the tournament. But I was actually not too surprised, and I had been testing not Dragapult, but like trying to remove Pidgeot from like Zard and other things before, because the format is sped up so much that like quick search is more valuable the longer a game goes because you have more times to use it. Whereas like Dragapult now is trying to win in 2 attacks, so you get like 2 quick searches. That's like going even on the card investment that you put in. You put in Candy, Ultra Ball, or whatever to get the Pidgeot in play, and then you're getting just 2 cards out of it. It's not worth it compared to just setting up a Dracloak is probably more valuable than a Pidgeot in half your games, because you can just evolve that right away and it'll see a couple extra cards. So I think it makes a lot of sense that the Pidgeot was removed from there, and also like it relieves like pressure on your Poffins and things. You can just fill your board with Dreepies and Duskulls, and not worry about the Pidgeys.
Do you think that Zard should be going to the Pokestop variant and not even playing Pidgeot? Because we saw some of those decks at Baltimore. I think one made day 2, and there were actually, I think, at least like 2 or 3. And I played against it, and I was like, well, this is kind of weird. And then they were setting up, and I was like, whoa. I was like, this is actually kind of good. So do you think they should just, cut Pidgeot from that and just focus on like the Turbo Dusknoir as well for Charizard? Or is that just, kind of worse Dragapult then?
I think it just is worse Dragapult.
Yeah.
Like I think that deck is it. I think it's just worse than either Dragapult or the Palkia Dusknoir deck. Like they kind of do the same type of game plan. I think Palkia is just stronger than Zard, again, like as an attacker in most matchups. Just being able to have Radiant Greninja and the Greninja X against like Terapagos, you're hitting for weakness for 1 energy. Like Zard, especially against like towards Terapagos build with the Bouffalance, like Zard can't hit those numbers early game, which is really bad for it. So if more people pick up the towards Terapagos build, then it wouldn't be good there either. But like the Palkia can handle that because of the Greninja and just hitting harder. So I think I think like Zard is trying to do something that just like is in the middle of Dragapult and Palkia, and it's not in. I think either direction is better, and like Zard's just the middle ground that isn't good enough.
So for Raging Bolt, I will not call it the most overrated, but I don't have anything else that I would consider more overrated.
What's
so I
more
guess-
overrated?
that's the thing. I don't know.
Please,
No,
tell me what's
there's
more
like
overrated.
it's such like a wide meta / format that I can't even assess ratings properly for anything. Because like when we'll do meta predictions later, but literally like I'm gonna say Bolt number 1 at like 20%, and then everything else I have no idea. Like it's just probably gonna be really weird and really wide. But I'm more biased about it because I've just been playing the deck a lot last week and a half, 2 weeks.
Drop it.
Because Raging Bolt is a deck that is awful in practice, or is awful in testing. Because when you test against it, you're testing like specific scenarios, and your opponent, the thing you're testing against, usually has like the things that they need to hit, and it looks terrible when that happens. In practice, like your opponent misses like 1 beat, and you just win the game pretty much because you're just more consistent than them. You're just actually hitting what you need to hit, and are just constantly hitting huge numbers every turn, and it's really gross. And I think what was being said earlier, just super consistent lists is just going to win best of 3s every once in a while, just because your opponent's decks are just going to falter here and there in one of the games, and then one misplay or one misstep in one of the other games, and then you just lose the best of 3. I will say it's still going to be like the best of 1 deck, probably for the remainder of this format. It's just so good for that. But I'm not as low on it as other people, but I do think it's probably overplayed for sure.
I think like Terapagos is way more consistent than Raging Bolt.
You think so?
So I think that's like the best. Yeah, the best of 1 deck. In Terapagos, like you find a nest ball turn 1, and you're if you have two and out to the Fan Rotom and the Terapagos, you're playing the game. And Raging Bolt needs like energies discard pile. You have to draw your Sada. You have to get your Ogerpons in play. Like Terapagos sets itself up. I think it's way more consistent. I think like Terapagos is probably the best deck in the format. And I'm not sure if it's even like close. Like Terapagos just has so much going for it. Like especially in best of 3, where literally the entire game is finished in +3 turns. So you can like I heard Tord say that one of the games at Dortmund, he had 6 minutes left on the clock and played a full game just fine because so the best of 3 time issues don't matter with Terapagos because the entire game is played in those 2 turns. And then I think it's like, more consistent than Raging Bolt, more consistent than like pretty much any other deck in the format. The only issue it has is with like Dragapult, and it can sometimes struggle against Charizard as well. So that is one thing that Charizard does have going for it, is that like depending on the Terapagos build, Zard can be bad. But Tord even had the Bouffalance in there, which is like very good against both Dragapult and Charizard. So yeah, I think Terapagos just has like, it's just better Raging Bolt, better than
Yeah, speaking about Terapagos, it is the deck that has picked up the most steam since those regionals happened, since our previous episode of the podcast. It's obviously a deck we need to talk about a lot. But do y'all think it'll be like spike? Like, I don't even know what the percentage was at Lima and stuff, but it wasn't super popular at
Dortmund, it was
Dortmund.
only like 5 or 6%.
Yeah, it was super
But I think
low.
that's more or less due to the people not having cards.
True,
That's
and then
like
it
the large
converted the
reason
best
why.
into day 2 at Dortmund out of like all the decks, which was ridiculous. But do you think it'll be like overplayed, underplayed, appropriately played in terms of just like percentage? Do you expect like a huge spike of it? Because it does seem like a lot of people are picking it up. I hit it constantly on ladder now. It seems like it'll be quite a big step up from Dortmund.
I think it'll go up for sure. I think that like one of the things, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. It was the most successful deck heading into day 2, but the deck didn't actually do very great in the second day, and I think that was largely because a lot of lists weren't necessarily very optimized. So I think that when they played against stronger players, they didn't see as much success. So that was, kind of, I guess, like one of the most interesting things. It was like the most successful deck like for the first day, but wasn't super successful on day 2. Heading into Louisville, I think the deck lists have, definitely been optimized a little bit more. And we have the Tord variant, like with the double Boufflant, which I think is, pretty good. I don't think you need the Boufflants though, because I oftentimes run into problems where you don't really have the bench space for them. But I do think they are, pretty solid in matchups, like Dragapults. They're decent also versus the Zard matchup as well. I think it's definitely going to be played to the rate that it should be. I don't expect it to be the most played deck. I still think a lot of people are going to hold on to Raging Bolt and Zard, simply because those decks have been out for so long. And I think Lugia and Terapagos will probably be fighting for that third most played spot, which, I think that it's strong enough to warrant. So yeah, I think that's kind of my answer on it. It's definitely very good. I wouldn't be surprised if most played deck, because I think it's just so powerful right now.
I think it's going to end up underplayed because of how difficult it is to play. Like I think it's by far the hardest deck to play in the format, and like especially as we get our lists optimized, like the Grant Manley list had one of every supporter, and like Tor's list wasn't too far off from that, and yeah, like Grant's list didn't even play any draw supporters aside from the one of Iono. So it's a very very different deck than most decks to play, and the lines are like kind of difficult to spot. I think I haven't been playing much in the past couple weeks, and I think if I had more time, I would probably play Terapagos to Louisville, but I'm leaning towards something else just because I don't have as much games on the deck as I think I need to be able to do well with it, and I think that's going to hold true for a lot of people. That the deck, it's very hard to play, and any mistake you make with it is like really easy to get punished. You have to think ahead a lot with it too, like multiple turns ahead, kind of like the old Inteleon decks played, where like I feel like Terapagos feels like Arc Inteleon on crack or something, where you just have one of every option, and then but Terapagos is trying to win in 2 turns or 2 or 3 turns, and like there's so much can go wrong, like so much you can overlook. Like I know like a couple times just playing on ladder, like you think you have a combo, but then you realize your opponent like has a way to get to one prize, and then you can't do it. Your whole deck like stops working when your opponent has one prize left, because you can't like Briar or Dusknoir. So yeah, it's very hard to plan around everything that can happen, especially when Thornton gets involved in a lot of the decks.
Yeah. Remember I played against Manly, and he was trying to figure out how to win the game, and his brain was just like exploding because he was like, I think I have it. I don't know if I have it. And he's looking at this giant hand, and he's just like trying to figure out. He takes like 3 minutes on the play. I'm just like sitting there being like, are you going to do something? He's a friend of mine. So I gave him that courtesy. But yeah, I like just like watching even like the strongest players just be like, I have no idea what I'm doing there. The first like 5 to 10 games, I was like, wait a minute, I could have just done this and that would have been way better. So yeah, I totally agree with what Jake said. It is very hard to play, and if you aren't 100% comfortable with it, play something else.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it'll be appropriately played. I don't think it will be completely overplayed, but I also don't think it will be completely underplayed. I think that people have had enough time to practice with it, but there's also like the people who just like know that they're not at the high enough level to play it yet. And I think like at this point, people know that is easily like one of, if not the strongest decks in the format. You have so many lines with it, so I probably would say that it would be appropriately played.
That's fair. Cool. All right. Jake says it's BDIF, so definitely play it at Louisville. My next question then is just we talked about most overrated. Everyone said Raging Bolt. What do you think the most underrated deck or decks are right now?
Palkia. Um, Palkia Dusknor. No one plays it, but the deck does well. I think there were only two in day two of Dortmund. However, Stefan got top four. I lost to Stefan. I was four at Dortmund, and I played against him, and I was like, wow, this deck is way, way stronger than I thought it was. So I would say like that Palkia is a very, very solid deck. I think the Dusknor is probably the best way to play it. The Greninja is really, really cool as well in this format. So yeah, I think the deck is way stronger than its results show and the amount of people that choose to play it. I think it's just because people kind of forgot about Palkia and like maybe they don't have the cards for it anymore. I'm not 100% sure, but I think people should definitely try it out. I think it deserves to be a deck that takes up at least 5 to 7% of the format because I do think it's that good. It's really, really strong.
Yeah, I was actually considering this deck as well, playing it. I think the one thing that makes me hesitant is like the Dragapult matchup is like pretty sketchy, I think. But like if you get off like the early like Greninja and just wipe their board, you're gonna win. But if they get a Dragapult in play, like it's very hard for you to do anything because they have the same options, but they can board wipe your Duskulls. So yeah, Dragapult I think is like the only concern. But aside from that, its matchups are like all pretty solid, and it's very annoying for Raging or for Terapagos to play against because of like the Greninja option, just a one shot for one energy, but also like the double KO attacks are very annoying, and it's a Dusknoir deck, so you can mess with their like prize race and what their options are. So I think yeah, I think it's probably the best at like uh, dismantling your opponent's board. Like Terapagos is second best at that, but the Palkia variant is definitely the best because you've got Radiant Greninja and the Greninja EX and Dusknoir in the same deck, and that's like yeah, very hard to deal with for anything that is like benching anything with less than 90 HP.
I have to say, I was decently impressed by the Goldango deck that did well at Dortmund. I don't think the deck is by any means like tier one, but I don't think that anybody should count it out. You know, you obviously have the Greninja, you got Palkia, and like it's obviously like you can deal a massive amount of damage. So if you're expecting a lot of Dragapult, Charizard, Lugia, Regidrago, even like Raging Bull, like if you're expecting any of those, I think it could actually be a strong play because you can set your board up with all one prizers, and then just evolve into like a ton of Goldangos, draw out your entire deck, and then just set it up so they have to have a lot in order to win. And like even then, like you're still gonna win the prize race. So I don't think the deck is horrible by any means.
Jake, is Palkia your underrated answer as well?
Yeah, I think it is. There's the other like the Banette Gardevoir deck did like got 14th at Dortmund. I think that deck is like probably underrated, but I don't think it's um like a top tier deck. It's probably a tier 3 deck. I think the Palkia Dusknoir deck is like a tier 2 deck. And it's definitely not represented like a tier 2 deck.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely agree with Benny that Goldango's probably underrated right now because all the games I played against it, I've been pretty impressed with just what they're able to get away with and how cleanly they can execute everything they want to execute all the time. You just draw a lot of cards and you just get to hit big numbers as well. 260 HP is really annoying for a lot of decks to deal with. So really strong deck, very flexible. My underrated pick is a shocking answer, but I think Regidrago is kind of underrated going into Louisville, because it's just Regidrago. It's really strong, really good into a lot of things. Jake was telling me before, I believe Pedro Torres was the one who was playing like the Noivern EX, which gives you good options against Raging Bolt potentially, and more concretely against Terapagos, right?
Yeah, you can use that second attack to lock the Temple of Sinnoh in play, and it stops them from playing any energies. So you just pull off that attack, and they probably just instantly lose on the spot in most cases. Like they can pop a couple Dusknors, but if you just chain a couple Regidragos with that attack, you're gonna win. So I think if you're playing Regidrago, I'd like highly consider the Noivern EX, even if you're not playing any of the like scoop up Cyclone and Penny or Turo or whatnot. Just having that option against Terapagos, as it'll probably see a lot more play this weekend.
The one problem with Regidrago, in my opinion, is the fact that a lot of decks have become like a lot more faster, and like that's kind of the same problem with Charizard. Is that like your deck, like you obviously you want to save that V star for later, but now like you're seeing decks like even play Noctowl just so that they can get like all the cards they need to get that turn to attack. Because like you obviously don't want to waste that V star, but if you end up having to, you're automatically at such a massive disadvantage later on in the game that it's obviously going to come back to hurt you. Which is why I think that Regidrago is underrated, but I also don't know if it's that good of a play for this weekend and in this format in general.
It's fair. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so next question then is, which deck do you think will convert the best from day 1 to day 2?
Terapagos, because the best players will play it.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say either Terapagos or maybe Dragapult. Now that we've got like the best list, I think, out there.
Yeah, I would probably have to agree with Terapagos. I could potentially see a deck like Lugia maybe getting there just because of how powerful it is. It's basically just like a better Raging Bolt in that sense, in terms of power, and it also has like the skill ceiling of Raging Bolt. So if I'm gonna pick a deck that I think is gonna go far in the tournament, that's easy to play, I would probably pick Lugia. It did very well at both Joinville and Dortmund for a reason, and I don't think it's anything that should be slept on at all.
Yeah, we can talk about Lugia for a bit now. Um, Obviously, like you just mentioned, won Joinville, got second place at Dortmund. So very good results recently. I don't think were any in top 8 in Lima. No, Lima was like 4
Wasn't
Dragapults.
Dragapult made it?
Yeah, pretty dominant. But yeah, obviously Lugia just a deck that seems to be totally strong still, and just seems resistant to a lot of the new stuff that's come. How is the Terapagos Lugia stuff play out? Is it still like fine for Lugia?
Very close. It feels about
Yeah,
50-50.
it does feel like a very close matchup. If Terapagos can like pop off like turn 2, completely wipe out Lugia's board, then it's obviously very rough for that. But I think if Lugia is able to establish double Archeops with Chinchino early, it definitely gets very rough for Terapagos.
I think it's kind of whoever goes first wins a lot of the time.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very very coin flippy
Yeah.
matchup with all the hyper aroma or capturing aromas too. Lots of coin flips.
Yeah, very exciting. Love the coin flip matches. But yeah, I guess if Terapagos is the main thing, I guess the other thing that matters then is if we expect the two decks to probably change the most in play percentage from like Dortmund to now being Terapagos and Dragapult. Um, Obviously, Roll did lose to Dragapult in the finals playing Lugia, but I know before that matchup was like totally fine for Lugia, but now obviously with the heavy Dust Snores, you can just pop them as Cinchinos before they become a problem.
He didn't draw very well either.
Yeah,
by the
exactly.
way.
Yeah,
He didn't
yeah.
set
So
up
it's
very
not
well.
not the best representation of it, but do y'all think it's still like favored for Lugia? Is it still like fine? What?
I think it's close-ish. Like Dragapult, as opposed to the last format where you had to like set up Pidgeot and stuff like that. This version of Dragapult's a lot faster, so you're able to get turn to attack much
Yeah,
more
the matchup was
consistently.
abysmal for Dragapult before, but yeah,
Yeah,
this version
no,
makes some sense
100%.
for it to be faster. Yeah.
Yeah, this version's faster, which means that especially if they're able to go first, they can establish a lot of pressure on Lugia. which then like makes the matchup pretty favored for Dragapult at that point. So it's probably another one of those coin flip matchups. But I do think that Lugia definitely gets the hand if Dragapult is slow to start and doesn't get that turn to attack.
Yeah, I think if those are the two decks that'll probably experience the most change in play percentage, and it's basically 50-50 or close-ish with both those decks, then yeah, Lugia seems totally fine. Totally still well positioned. Does have that solid Raging Bolt matchup, and just kind of can handle everything else totally fine if you draw well enough. I know before everyone was in past podcasts when I ask and talk about Lugia, generally the opinion's pretty low because of the consistency level of the deck. Obviously, the consistency hasn't changed really at all in previous formats. So it hasn't. The list looked the same as previous formats.
Earth
We're
and
all
Vessel.
playing the same one. What are you
That
saying?
helps out Earth and Vessel.
Yeah.
So the one of Earth and Vessel in Rahul's list, I find myself using it to dump an Archeops more than actually
Yeah.
trying to find the lightning energy. So I think that list is like percentage points more consistent than I guess like the regular version.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when you have Squawk plus Fez plus Earth and a fifth discard card, it's pretty hard to beat that, right? I was actually looking for a while. This is like 2 months ago, probably. This was pre Shrouded Fable, actually. I was looking into options for having a discard item that wasn't Earth and Vessel because I just didn't need like the extra energy. And I was like, oh, Techno Radar's like not terrible because you can grab Bundle and Iron Hands with it if you just need a random discard card. But definitely better to have the extra energy and the extra lightning, especially with this Raikou that cleans up a lot of random issues that can come up in the Lugia games. If I play Lugia, I will probably just play Roll 60 because I trust it and it keeps doing well, and I'm just going to send that and have complete faith in it. So, it seems very good, and
Yeah.
it's also going to be favored into other Lugia lists. So if you want that mirror edge too, it seems good for that. But yeah, it seems like it's just going to be well positioned. Everyone tells me Lugia is going to be good, so there you go.
I was like a pretty vocal hater on Lugia in the last
You
podcast,
were.
especially. But I mean, like, you can't really deny the results. You know, second at Baltimore, second at Dortmund, first at Joinville. Like, all three of those events were like regional level. Like, they were massive, and they were like really good indicators on what the meta is going to look like. So, like, as much as I want to hate on Lugia, I also can't really deny the results. And I do think it will be a pretty decent play into this weekend.
I think what's sort of changed is that like a lot of other decks have gotten less consistent, so it matches like Lugia's inconsistency a little bit. But also, I think Iron Hands has gotten like way stronger than it was like a couple formats ago. But nothing can use Iron Hands except for Lugia. Like Lugia is literally the only deck that can, because like Lost Box can, but you're gonna lose to a Kyurem, and Dusknoir is also a problem there, and Chen Pao like can't beat Dusknoir. So Lugia is really the only one, and also Miraidon, but Miraidon has like issues with just being like flooding the board with anything that can just go 2/2/2 against Miraidon is gonna beat that. But Lugia is like very hard to go 2/2/2 against sometimes because of the legacy energy, and they can also make one prize boards. But the Iron Hands itself is like a lot stronger. Like an early Iron Hands against Dragapult can just win the game. Same against Terapagos. Same against basically anything in the format except for Raging Bolt, but that matchup's already good for you because of Chinchino and Legacy Energy.
Lugia is good. Tier 1 deck.
Yeah. I was going to say, kind of since you mentioned Miraidon, Jake, is Miraidon just like bad? Why is nobody playing it? Because the Miraidon matchup's like much better now for the Lugia matchup for Miraidon's even better now because you can actually KO bears. So it goes from like favorite to even more favored. I saw the training win rate was like atrocious for Lugia into Miraidon. I guess it was probably already bad before, but I know Jesse in the past said it was like a 55-45 thing. And it's definitely just way better than that now. But nobody's playing Miraidon like at all. Is it just not good?
I think it's like on par with Raging Bolt, and they're both bad. Terapagos just does better. Yeah.
Okay. Just Terapagos kind of doing a lot of things that other decks are doing, but just better is kind of the recurring theme I'm seeing here.
Terapagos takes extra prize cards like Iron Hands does with the Briar and Dusknoir, and Terapagos can like start with a one prize board, which Miraidon can't. And Terapagos just gets to search the deck for like 3 cards plus every turn, and Miraidon has to hope that there's energies in the top 5 cards of their deck. So yeah, I think that's a lot worse.
Your mid game with Miraidon's also like horrendous, and your late game as well. Like you're basically just banking all on turn one with that deck.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely don't like it. I would actually consider playing Raging Bolt before I play Miraidon. It's that bad.
That's
Bolt
tough.
can beat Zard and Miraidon can't. Like if they just
Sure.
like don't put down a Pidgeot and they just stick lone Zard in the active, lists don't play Raichu anymore. So they just literally cannot deal with it. I played against a Miraidon at Dortmund and I was not drawing very well, and the game was not even close. I got one Zard up, the game ended, and that's pretty much what it is. Like you have to do a lot more versus Raging Bolt. But like versus Miraidon, just as a Zard deck, you just need to do anything. And yeah, it's just such a bad matchup that I feel like that kind of disqualifies the deck, because like Zard will still be played at a decently high level. If you can't beat that, your Dragapult matchup is probably also pretty scary as well. Your Terapagos matchup, I don't think is that great either, especially if they play the Bouffalance, then you can't really even handle one Terapagos. So yeah, there's just so many problems with the deck. I definitely play Raging Bolt over it for sure.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Benny, I wanted to ask you about your baby Blocklax, because it does it. I would also put it at, I don't know, you can say Blocklax is underrated for like every tournament, and that'd probably be an accurate statement. I know it's been doing well in a lot of online tournaments recently. This definitely wasn't the case for like some of the recent formats, especially Shroud of Fable wasn't doing like amazingly online, but here it's definitely been doing a lot better. But do you think it's still a really strong play? Do you think it'll be played enough? Or do you think it'll be just be its same old like 3% meta share? What do you think?
Well, first of all, that'll never be played enough. I think everyone should play Snorlax. But seriously, I think the deck is like honestly decently positioned. Obviously, you have the major flaw being the Lugia matchup. That matchup is horrendous. Like there's no point playing any text for it. It's just like don't even bother. The matchup's unwinnable. Um, and I mean, I think you definitely have lines against Terapagos. I don't think that matchup is anywhere near free, but you definitely can like make your deck have a 60-40 to it. You know, they only run 4 DTEs, so um, you could probably actually warrant running Sinnohs in this format just for Terapagos and also as a helping factor against Lugia. And then like the other decks like Charizard, Raging Bolt. Am I missing anything else? I mean, like you obviously are very solid into those. You know, just send up Mimikyu, send up Cornerstone. Those matchups are like pretty self-explanatory. And I mean, I think that the reason it's doing well in the online events speaks to that is obviously not a bad play. But if we're expecting a lot of Lugia in Louisville, I probably wouldn't touch it. But if you're willing to accept the horrible Lugia matchup and you can make your list be able to beat Terapagos, I think I would probably consider it. I don't think it's bad by any means.
I think all your Dusknoir decks are losable, and that's kind of the scary thing. I even think the Zard matchup is losable. Like I think it's fine, but I think you can definitely lose it. If they play, Thornton, Palpad, plus Professor Turo, like maybe even like Vacuum, I think the matchup can get pretty scary. But I think it's fine. I mean, I think the deck always does relatively okay because you play against a lot of people who don't necessarily know how to play against it, and it seems like that happens every single tournament where there's like one in top 32. I think like the same thing is, going to probably apply to this tournament. Yeah, your Lugia matchup is terrible. You can beat the Terapagos matchup. It kind of depends on, like whether or not they're playing Jet Energy. Some of them are also playing Switch too. Actually, I think a lot of them are playing Switch. Some of them are playing Professor Turo and also Palpad. I think that Towards list, played that, and I think that makes it really, really difficult to beat. So I think it's okay, but I think a lot of its matchups, especially against the Dusknoir decks, are really scary. And if you lose just like one singular game, then you're going to tie it like absolute best because you can't really finish 3 games.
Yeah.
So I would definitely stay away from it, but I think it's still okay.
I would also like to add one thing is that like also kills Blocklax and also is good against both Dragapult and Charizard. Is I think that Spiritomb is actually a really good card in this format because decks like Charizard, Dragapult, like I said, and Snorlax, they all rely on Rotom, and Charizard and Dragapult rely on Luminion as well to set up. So does Lugia. Like,
Yeah.
I think that overall, if you have a deck slot and you want to like make your opponent's decks less consistent, um, which would therefore help you be faster and win the game, I think that you should definitely consider putting a Spiritomb into your deck. I think the card's really good in this format.
I did get cooked on stream today by a Goldango playing Spiritomb because I was playing Lugia. I was still set up because I had the Squawk ability, and I did have the Fez for like mid to late game draws, but I still would have preferred just slamming down Illuminion and bossing, which I was not able to do. So definitely maybe justifiable again for sure. And then I think, oh, really quickly, I wanted to bring up Guardy because we talked about it a little bit before we started. Jake, what's going on with Guardy? What were you talking about before the podcast where you're like, I wouldn't want to play it?
Yeah, I mean, I've played it like to a couple of cups like recently. Just one cup recently, but I think now that like Terapagos is becoming more popular, that matchup's very tough. Um, like the any of the Dusknoir decks is really like if you go first as Guardy against the Dusknoir decks, then you're not getting your Guardy EX and play the next turn unless you're playing Rare Candy. So I think you kind of have to play Rare Candy because otherwise the opponent's just gonna Dusknoir all your Guardies. And if you go second, you get TM Evo off, and then your opponent just blows up your two Curlias sometimes, and you lose the game there. Um, I think, yeah, just Dusknoir in general is really bad for Guardy. Makes the game way too fast for it, and Guardy like can't keep up. The only way Guardy can take extra prize cards is their Monkey Dories, but you need like two in play to take an extra prize in a turn, and then you have to have two attachments on the Monkey Dories to be able to do that, and you don't have enough time in the game to be able to do that most of the time.
Yeah, I was testing a lot of Guardy up to this event, and I do think it is pretty decent into a majority of the decks, but Terapagos is the main problem. Like, even if so, what I found in my testing is that even if you were able to respond to the double curly knockout with a stamp and another TM Evo, they still are going to have Pidgeot set up, which is like very hard for your deck to deal with. They can just find whatever they need. They could probably blow up one of the curlies, maybe even both of them again, and like at that point, the game is just over. Yeah, Terapagos like just outpaces you in pretty much every way. And if your deck is also not playing Manaphy, you're very vulnerable to decks that play Radiant Greninja, or like those that can attack with it, such as Palkia and even Goldango. So well, I did like Guardy going into this event. The rise of Terapagos has made me go away from it.
Cool. All right, so getting into meta predictions now. Then I mentioned earlier my meta predictions: Raging Bolt number one, and then I don't know after that. Um, I do think top four will be some combination of Bolt one, and then two, three, and four will be some combination of Terapagos, Bolt, Lugia, maybe. But even then, that doesn't seem like right. I don't know. This is like the most confused slash unsure I've been of what top four slash five of the meta will look like. Do y'all have better ideas?
Sadly, Raging Bolt's going to be number one on my list at least. And then as for the rest of my list, it's going to be Dragapult number two, Lugia number three, Charizard number four, and then Terapagos number five.
I think like for me, I think it's better to think about it in like terms of tiers
Sure.
because there's usually like uh, two or three decks that are like within 1% of each other, and then there's a drop off to the next. So I think like that like first tier is going to be like Charizard, Raging Bolt, and maybe Dragapult could sneak in there, but probably unlikely. And then the next will be like yeah Dragapult, Regidrago, Lugia, Terapagos. I don't think Terapagos probably deserves to be in that like first tier of decks, but I don't think it'll make it there this tournament. And then everything falls off after that. But like I think that's a better way to think about it because it's like about what you actually have to care about. Because like if a deck is like 1% more than another, like you don't actually have to care like differently about those decks. So I don't know if it'll be Raging Boulder Zard number one, but I think like both of them you should care about sort of equally.
Yeah, I think that one thing that is, probably worth kind of talking about is I think that a lot of players that were going to play Raging Bolt, 2 or 3 weeks ago, are still going to play Raging Bolt, because the majority of players are at the more casual level. So what's been happening at the most recent tournaments, I don't think is going to affect a lot of people's decisions. So I think that Bolt will probably still be the most or second most played deck, and then we'll see Zard. I still don't think a whole lot of people are going to pick up Dragapult. I think that like some will, but I think that a lot of people are more comfortable with Zard as like the Dusknoir variant of choice right now in this format. Despite Pult being arguably slightly stronger potentially. So I think that we'll probably see a fight between Terapagos and Lugia, in my opinion, as the third most played deck, and then we'll see. Pult as well. But maybe I'm kind of like overestimating how many people are going to play the Terapagos deck, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think Terapagos will like we were kind of talking about earlier. I think it'll be probably underplayed for how good it is. Again, because of just how difficult it is to play, and it's still being a relatively new thing. Like you said, people probably locked in their decks. A lot of people will have locked in their decks like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe even before Terapagos really took off. So I don't think it'll. I think it'll be around that 3 to 4 position, kind of that second or third tier in Jake's terminology, I guess, in terms of play rate. But it'll definitely be a threat and a very strong deck to be ready to deal with for Louisville. Any other kind of overall meta thoughts or general comments you want to say going into this tournament?
Dusknoir is very strong.
That sounds very strong. Yep.
I think the format is just very high rolly. And I think Terapagos is probably the least high rolly deck. It's like the most consistent. But I think outside of that, everything is very hit or miss. Like you hit your big combo on turn 1, and then turn 2 and turn 3, you're going to win every game you do all of that. So I could see any deck winning this tournament. Just anyone who draws the best and wins the most opening coin flips. I think the games are so fast that it's like hard to get away from that, like opening coin flip determining a lot of games in this format at least.
I think that's it then for this episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube. Check out the Patreon for bonus episodes of the podcast as well. Any shout outs, Gabe?
Shout out to Dead Draw Gaming. If you're looking for coaching, be sure to check out my Metafy. Shout outs, FCBC sleeves as well. And yeah, thanks for having me. I'll be at Louisville, so if you see me, make sure to say hi.
Jake?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Gearhart as always.
All right, and then Benny.
So I did my family shoutouts last week, so I feel like I got to switch it up this week. So I'm going to shout out Dead Draw Gaming, obviously, FCBC sleeves as well. I got to give Etchy's new sleeves some competition.
It's not my sleeve,
then,
but yeah, go ahead.
I'll shout out Michael Davidson's new Metafy. Got to give him some love. And then I'll shout out my 2 other cats. I'll shout out Paris and Larry.
Shout out Paris and Larry. Are either those the new black one, the new black cat?
Nope, the new black one is Frankie.
That's Frankie. Dang it. Well, shout out to Frankie. That's my shout out.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at EtchyOK and on Twitch, twitch.tv/Etchy. Oh yeah, I on my stream today I hit Hedrick on ladder. And then I did my turn 1, and then it was his turn, and then he drew, and then he conceded. So it was pretty awesome. It was a good experience. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.